some of the infrastructure bills that are out there
Sure.
right now. I know Senator Timmy, or U.S. Senator Timmy Duckworth, she says a lot of this money is going to come to Illinois, but she hasn't elaborated how or went into detail.
Right.
Do you care to elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, let me explain it this way. We all want an infrastructure bill. I have been preaching this from the very beginning. But let me tell you what I think infrastructure is, and I think the majority of the people listening to your program will believe that and understand that. Roads and bridges, waterways. When we talk waterways, we're talking levees, locks, dams, inland ports and seaports, airports, rail, water and sewer line for our communities, and connecting with the internet and making sure that we get rid of the Great Divide. Or not the Great Divide, the digital divide. Those are infrastructure items. The $1.5 trillion bill that they're proposing out there for infrastructure, which is tied to the larger bill, and it has been said by the president it's tied, and it's been said by the speaker that it's tied, only 20, if you put all those things together, only about 22 to 26% goes to those items that I just described. Instead, they go to things that, one, we don't need, two, that will cost our children in the long run and show no ability for return. One of those items is $600 billion. $600 billion of the 1.5 goes to laying out an electric grid for charging electric cars. I'm encouraging electric cars to come into existence. That being said, only 2% of our automobiles and vehicles at all are electric right now. Our forefathers never had to put and invest their national debt into buying gas stations. The market drove that. Likewise, the market should drive this. As we move forward, we've got to make sure that we're wise, and if we're going to spend $1.5 trillion, let me say it again, $1.5 trillion, it should be going to those items that I talked about just earlier, which is roads, bridges, rail, all of that, because that's vitally important to allow us to not only grow as a nation, but compete in the world.
So if they spend the $600 billion on these electric charging stations, what's the end game there? I mean, is this, or do they want these government controlled, or?
That's just it. That's government overreach. It's that socialism step that they keep talking about. And they say, and I don't know whether they call it new socialism or whatever, it's socialism, and it doesn't work. Breaking the government and breaking your children for generations to come is not a good idea.
Now, one of the things we've been hearing pitched about with the infrastructure and repairing roads and building new roads, et cetera, and bridges in Illinois is that it's going to create a lot of new jobs. But are these temporary jobs or permanent?
No, there would be a lot of jobs whenever we did do that. And it would be, if you invest like our forefathers did in the interstate highway and everything like that, great. They did exactly what we need to do. We need to make those investments to be able to compete in the world. And they would be good paying jobs, and they would be jobs that would last, because you can't build it overnight. So they would be long-term jobs. And the spin-off jobs would be vitally important. Believe me, I understand how important infrastructure is. I came from a family with the trucking business. I understand the concerns of making sure that we're putting highways down that are, one, able to move the traffic at the speed in which they need and safely. And right now, our bridges have to be replaced.
What changes need to be made to this infrastructure bill that would put you and other Republicans on board with it?
Exactly what I said. Making sure that those 5 items that I talked about, 6 items that I talk about, are truly infrastructure. It doesn't go off and vary into other programs or expansion of social programs. That's a different bill that we should take up if we're going to do that. And we have to have the revenue streams that are sensible, that actually work. The problem with the proposal that is out there right now is one of the revenue streams is taxing Bitcoin. Well, if you tax cyber money, first off, most of the people in this United States don't know how it works yet. 2, if you do it, it's very easily to move what you're handling of your Bitcoin offshore because it's on the net. And we're the only nation that's doing it. And if you're the only nation that's doing it, they're going to move away, and those revenues will not be generated. The other thing that it's proposing is that that the return on our dollar is going to be a 33% increase. A 30%, we're going to see a 33% return. Anybody in business knows you're not going to get 33%. You can have a good percent, and that's great, but they're basing their numbers on we're going to get a 33% return. So real revenue streams, not fake revenue streams.
And the plan to pay for it. I mean, what's the plan to pay for it?
That's their plan. That's their plan, along with 2.2, if we're talking about the bigger plan. So they are tied together, so we've got to talk about that. If they move forward with the other plan that's being proposed, which the more progressives want first, before they just give the 1.5, so then we're talking 3.2, 4.0, or 5.0, depending on who you talk to. The problem is that 2.5% of that is borrowed against the future when we were already in so much debt.
I know there's ways around it that this can be approved without Republican support.
Yeah, if they want to take the nuclear option. Here's the process. They're trying to do that anyway, okay? Reconciliation does not require a 60 vote in the Senate before the 50 vote. That being said, the only way is they've got to have, because there's such a close majority in the Senate, both Manchin and Sisma from Arizona, who have said they're not voting for it, have to come on board with them. They can pass it. It's well within their power to pass it. Now, the only thing that they can't do, but they can take what's known as a nuclear option on, which is probably not a good thing because it comes back to bite you later, and that is for the increasing of the debt limit. Now, understand, I voted before to increase the debt limit. I won't vote for this one because it's going to be spent on this. I was upset by the president the other day because when he was giving his plea in his speech that it's the Republicans that are blocking it, one, and that it's really just paying for what the previous administration did. No, the previous administration came in a bipartisan manner 3 different times to increase the debt limit and received both Republicans and Democrat votes. The problem is the Republicans do not feel like they've had the input in, or that they don't want to increase the debt limit with the thought that this process is going to go forward that is truly going to swing us towards a socialist nation.
And you were talking about Republicans not knowing what is in some of this. Do you believe there's not enough transparency right now?
There's not enough transparency right now. There's a lot of things we do know that are in it that are very, 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 very way overstepping on the reach of government and everything. I'm going to have to apologize. My phone's ringing in my ear. Sorry. I apologize. Okay. So.
No worries.
Sorry.
No worries. So
Loud.
Well, you did mention the debt ceiling and
right.
that being extended out right now to December. What happens in December?
Let me tell you that here's what happens in December. We've got to come back together. Well, the debt ceiling wasn't extended out to December, so you know that.
Okay.
The debt ceiling is a separate issue. Okay. We've got to do that. The debt ceiling has to be increased according to the experts at the Department of Treasury, okay, that we've got to do it by we're projected to run out somewhere between the 15th and the 30th of this month, okay? So that's where the debt ceiling argument is. The thing that was extended till December is the funding and the operational budget, and it was just simply extended at the existing level for the road construction. Otherwise, all of the road construction you see out there that's federally funded would all of a sudden have stopped. Our workers that were doing that road construction wouldn't have been paid. So that's why I supported that language that at least gets it through December. Why? Because we're supposed to already have passed that, it's called the surface funding, okay? The surface bill is passed every 2 years. It came to its deadline just a few weeks ago, so we were able to extend it out. That's the Transportation Committee that had already pushed that out. I was in agreement with that because we needed to keep people working.
And obviously that ties in with the spending bills.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that right now, Washington's abuzz with that.
Look, the spending is, of this bill, for the benefit that the American people will receive is nil. And for the Commander-in-Chief and others to say the cost is zero, there's no way. Look at the cost. There's an argument right now, and we talked about that earlier. 3.2, 4.2, 5.0, what is it? What's the actual dollar amount, and where are the revenues coming from? How are we going to pay for it in the long run? What benefits do the people of this United States receive from the larger spending bill, which is actually implementing the proposal of the Green New Deal? It implements a tremendous amount of social programs. And one of the things that's in there that's more bothersome than anything else is the fact that they would change what triggers the ability for the federal government to come in and look at your bank account. If you make a transaction either in or out of your bank over $600, then it can trigger an opportunity for the federal government to come in and check your banking records and modify and check and see what's going on there. That number before is $10,000. $10,000. That was put in years ago because of organized crime. It allowed for the opportunity of a transaction. It may even be that we need to take that, instead of making it $10,000, is $20,000 because of inflation. But instead, what they want to do is they want to bring it to $600. Most people's mortgages are more than $600. Car payments are more than $600. My wife, the beauty salon, we make a deposit every week, more than $600. And all of a sudden, and let me tell you how big this is, because they realized how important, what that means. They also, in the budget and in this spending package, double the members, the working employees at the IRS. Why? Because you can't chase that many rabbits with the people that they've got. So this is government growing uncontrollable and government controlling and coming into your life. Why? Because it is so costly. It is so costly that they know they have to monitor everyone to get every single dime out of everybody they possibly can. Socialism can't work unless the government knows what your income is.
Do you truly believe that's what's going on as they're trying to implement socialism?
It keeps looking this way. You can say what you want. I know who's pushing the bill. We know the side of the aisle that's pushing the bill. We even know that many people on that side of the aisle don't want it. But they're afraid because every time they turn around, somebody comes into their moderate Democrat district and they beat the person that isn't as far left as they are. Dan Lipinski is one of the best examples out of Chicago. He was beaten by the far left. Lacey Clay in St. Louis was beaten by the far left because they come in after the Democrats because they don't agree with this agenda that moves this nation into a completely nation that we won't recognize.
Yeah, it's headed there. And excuse me. And you bring up a good point. Being from Southern Illinois as well, we hear it screamed and echoed all the time. We're not Chicago.
We're not.
We're not Washington, D.C. We're a different group of people. And there's a lot of people here that feel frustrated because they feel like our voices are not heard. And it's not necessarily a lack of representatives trying. It's just they feel like we're outnumbered.
Right. And let me tell you the importance of a lot of things in our Constitution that people forget. So many people think we're a democracy. We're not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. Now that still means that we are controlled and put in by the voters. And the Constitution can be modified by the voters, has been several times. But we have it as an anchor. And there are places where the federal government can go, and there's places where the federal government stays out of. Right now, we're in the middle of a situation where we have the Attorney General of this United States has called on the agencies, FBI and others, to get involved in school board activities. I want everybody protected, but I don't want anybody's free speech right taken away. The problem with this is they're weaponizing the federal government whenever these are issues that should be handled at state and local levels. Your school board is the people you see every day. And guess what? If somebody is threatening that school board, your local police are the people who need to modify that because they know the situation, they know around. Now, the only time that would change, and this is already the case, If someone threatens across a state line, that changes the whole thing. And we already have that in place. Mm-hmm. So if a school board member is threatened from somewhere out, and it's a threat, it's not just a statement, because I deal with the same thing all the time in my job. If somebody threatens anyone across the state line, then it becomes a federal issue. But in state, which is your school board, where you have the right to go before your school board or any local government or any government and look them in the eye, and if you raise your voice, it's probably not the way it should be handled, but it's not against the law. Because these are vital issues for our children, our grandchildren, and parents should have the right to make sure they have an input into what's going on in their children's life. If we take that away, we've really stepped across the line.
I know we are less than a year into the new administration, and a lot of people in our region, a lot of our viewers, they're fearful. When I say fearful, I'm not speaking for everyone here, right. but there's a majority of people that I talk to and run into. They said, "Man, there's a lot of changes."
Right.
Is there a lot still to come down the pike that we don't even know about?
That's what we need to watch, the bills we were talking about. The overreach of the federal government, the growing of the federal government, and the giving of power to certain agencies that power is never granted them in the Constitution. Quite often, not be able to have due process. And a whole lot of that stems from the fact that the partisan rhetoric, but let me tell you that it's not partisan in the district. The district is, I've got Democrats as well as Republicans. They're a little worried. They may have been raised Democrat, and they're concerned just like you and I. They're pro-life, and all of a sudden somebody wants to threaten them because they're pro-life. They believe in the Second Amendment, and somebody wants to threaten to take that away from them. The list goes on and on of the problems of a government growing too fast and moving away from what our founding fathers had in mind.
We were talking earlier about transparency.
Yeah.
And one of the big issues, you spoke on it recently, is Afghanistan.
Yeah.
With how much is still in Afghanistan that's American property.
Right. Let me tell you that first off, it was handled terribly. The withdrawal, if you are for getting out of Afghanistan, you can't say, oh, that it was handled great. Okay? And let me praise, because Scott Air Force Base, the men and women of Scott, and their group of Transcom, and for what they did, because they were part of the evacuation. But the problem is that when the administration wants to praise and say how great it was for the people we got out, first off, they're ignoring the fact of the people who we left in. And second, whenever has someone who actually sunk a ship got to say positive things about how well they manned the lifeboats? That's exactly what we're doing here. What we did in Afghanistan caused 13 lives of people who should have never died, 13 military lives, not counting the civilian and others that were involved as well that had died and or injured, and the list goes on. We also gave up our forward observation post with Russia and China. We have had the testimony of Millie and others before us that said that they felt that they should have kept present. They advised the president of that. He said, no, I want it down to this level. And once he said, I can't have the 2,500, 2,800 military persons to guard Barang Air Base, where we could have had a sensible withdrawal in a correct way, once he did that, it changed the mission of the military. So he did not take the advice of his military leaders. He said he did, but the reality is he did not. He did not listen to where they were saying, and then when they got down to the lesser, they didn't have a choice but to do what they did, which ended up turning very, very bad. Now the question is, why those military commanders, and you can like or hate the former president. He had military commanders, if they didn't take his advice, or if he didn't take their advice, they said, you know what? I'm here to advise you, and if you're not going to take my advice, I'm out. Obviously, somebody else needs to advise you. That's something that I feel, and not just I, but I serve with a tremendous amount of generals and high-ranking officers in Congress who all feel that same way.
And we left a lot of supplies, a lot of aircraft.
They are the most armed nation. They're about the third or fourth most armed nation in the world.
That's a danger.
That's a big danger because a lot of that equipment, I mean, the Blackhawks, the support planes, the tanks, the personnel movers, the guns, the ability to take down airplanes with many of the weapons that were left there. Bad procedure. I mean,
let's talk about this for just a second too. And it's more than what we see just as weapons and airplanes and helicopters. We left also fully equipped bases that are self-sustainable with generators, water purifiers.
All of it. Now the question is, as their economy is falling like it is, what can they do with that? The only time I ever saw anything like this, back in the early 90s, or mid-90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the breakup of the Soviet Union, I went over with a group from Illinois into Ukraine. General Harris, who was the adjutant general at the time, we're flying in, and he said, "Mike, you'll appreciate this. Watch when we land. Look out the left side of the plane." Well, I'm looking out, and as far as you could see were Russian MiGs and Russian helicopters. That when Russia withdrew from Ukraine, they kept the planes. Now, they were scrapping them out to keep each individual one going, and they didn't have a lot of pilots, but they left that, and that's the only time I've ever seen that before. As a Marine, you're always trained as you roll back, and if you can't move your equipment back, you have what's known as incendiary grenades. You take, and if it's a piece of equipment that has an engine, you lay an incendiary grenade on the engine block, it melts it down, and they have a big chunk of metal left there. But we didn't do that.
Why?
I don't get it. We're still investigating and trying to figure out. Understand that is through the HASC committee. It's not my committee, but working and talking with each one of them. A whole lot of it was we believed that we were leaving some of it to the Afghan military that we had trained. A whole lot of it was they were getting mixed messages from command. And those mixed messages caused too quick of a withdrawal and not a wise withdrawal. And like I said, I may have even, I agree that we should have reduced and only kept a forward observation post. That's not a never-ending war. Because remember, we have it in Korea, we have it in Japan, we have it in Germany. All of these places where we have fought. And some of those become our great allies. But we still keep an observation post and a presence, and that's what we should have done as well.
Now yourself and 19 others are questioning what has been left and the amount of money that was left for us.
We're asking for a hearing. And that hearing so that we can know if we start seeing things show up. The concern we have is as their economy starts to fall, and China has already moved in to assist, well, now all of a sudden, a country that already has stolen our intellectual property over and over and over again, now will be able to take hold of these pieces of equipment and really analyze our equipment and know if they ever have to mount a defense against us or they mount attack against us, they'll know what we've got.
So it's not just the physical equipment, it's the technology.
It's technology. It's everything. Yeah.
And what I was getting at a moment ago, yourself and 19 others want to know why this is not more transparent from the administration.
Exactly.
That's actually being sealed.
Exactly. And there's the problem. The only time you can get things that are classified released to you. Everybody thinks, oh, well, you're a member of Congress, you're going to have it released to you. No, I can put a request in, and then I have to go to what's known as a SCIF, and I can actually, if they grant the request, and I have to have a need to know, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But the people need to know in a case like this. You can't automatically just say, okay, this is classified. and not give someone a reason why it's classified. And some of those people that were on the 19 that signed are part of the HASS committee. That means they have a need to know, but yet they have not been notified on to give a list and an account. But we need to have a transparency on this, because the people already know what's over there. That doesn't mean you have to list some of what might be classified, but give us an...
What would be a good reason for keeping that classified and not sharing it?
I don't know, unless one of those items that was left, or some of those items that were left, have things that can be analyzed. We don't want to let the enemy, or those that would be a danger to us, be able to go in and say, locate exactly what it is they're looking for. Okay, that would be the only reason. There's no reason why we can't talk about the fact that there's 250 Blackhawks. There's however many of this, how many of that. And we've got the list on those. We want to know where they are. We want to know which base they were left at. Who got hold of them? Why were they left there? Were they originally abandoned because we were rushed to get out, or were they left to the Afghan army who abandoned them? That we need to know. Rifles and jeeps is probably what we should have left to the Afghan army. The other stuff, but what we did do is, and this is when things started falling apart, and a lot of people don't understand this. What we started doing was, originally we've been working with them. We provided contractors who gave them advice and repair for the airships so that they could continue to operate. We pulled those. And then we wonder how come an army fell apart. Well, when you start taking the support group out of an army, and then you have the political problem that exists, and that army then watches their president run away, you add that all together, that was a collapse. For criticizing the frontline military personnel, many of those groups rolled back into some areas to try to defend. Their most elite forces actually moved into an area and are still holding that area today. But you don't hear a lot about that.
No, I sure don't hear anything. I got to cough real quick. I had that little tickle cough going. I'm going to switch gears on you for just a moment here, because I know I've kept you probably way longer than need to be. This is something from young to poor, or poor to rich, from young to old. They see right now unemployment, but it's not that there's a lack of jobs. There's a lack of employees.
Right.
This is a big problem.
We had a group that met earlier this week on this in the Metro East area. People who are on the front line of trying to put people with jobs. And it's a mass amount of people who need employees, but the original argument was that we had been paying unemployment at a higher rate and for a lot longer time than I think we should have. That's why I didn't support the partisan-only COVID bill. But that ran out the second week of September, okay? But what we've done is we've changed the thought process of many people. Normally, it would be a younger group that trying to encourage them to come into the workforce. We're actually seeing that come back. But the age 50 and above, it's really wild that what they saw, either when we're doing these studies, and this is things we'll go back to Washington to try to figure out how we change. Once a person above 50, they keep their work ethic, and it is very difficult for them to all of a sudden say, okay, I'm retiring now, because they retire at 65 when they can draw their Social Security, that type of thing. But all of a sudden, they've been home. Either they've been out of work or they've been working from home. But quite often, they got to spend time with their family. And so they're not really wanting to come back into the workforce as we know it. They look for other opportunities to generate revenue, but then that leaves this large hole in jobs that need to be done. Transportation industry is suffering tremendously. We're talking about the fact that Christmas gifts are going to be hard to get because you can't get them shipped. Well, you can't get them produced, or you can't get them brought into this nation because we don't have the dock workers. I had to do an event the other day in the East Coast, and I was flying down the East Coast looking out, and I was sitting with another member of Congress, and they go, see the amount of ships that are lined up. We've never had that before because we don't have the dock workers to unload. So it is all over. It's not just our restaurants. It's not just our convenience stores. It's everywhere. But it is trying to find out what's the mindset. I don't, if there's a lot of jobs and I can find a job that I only get to work during the day, I don't want to do the night work, right? All of these different things that now you've had that freedom. The question is how we continue the economy to get better if we don't get people back to work.
And I'm sure you heard this, during the pandemic, there was a lot of folks like myself, a lot of people that stayed working during it, and they were seeing people that were unemployed making more off unemployment. I mean, no rent.
Sure, that's very difficult to see, and the frustration, and I heard that in my office over and over again. These people are making more money by staying home, and I'm working because I'm essential, but there was a lot of things that could have been done better in all of the COVID bills.
So I want to touch on something. You mentioned it a moment ago. We have more than 50 ships off the coast of California right now because there's no dock workers, no one to
And you've got almost that many off the East Coast.
And we're facing all these shortages right now. I mean, these could be really bad for especially the Midwest,
right?
As far as foods, etc. We've seen local states employ the National Guard to drive school buses to get kids to school. Is there any talk of using the National Guard in any shape or form to unload these ships?
That's up to each individual state. Okay, they could do that. Has there been any talk from the military side? Because what we would control is the reserve or the actual military. Mm-hmm. That's not exactly their mission, but I've not heard of any of that. But something's got to be done.
Yeah, I wouldn't think I've thought about it with the school buses either.
Yeah. And so, I've been talking a lot to those members who represent those areas who've been trying to explain it to us. But until you see it, it's like the other problem we're having. The border is not a real big problem, you don't think, unless you go down and see it. Same thing with this. You don't realize that there was no wait line before to offload a ship that has come from another country across the ocean, either ocean, to get to us. Now, the wait line is tremendous. And it's because there's not enough people on the dock to get it off. But the question is, if you get it off on the dock, the other problem is there enough trucks sitting there or train cars sitting there to be loaded so that they can move on to the Midwest and across this nation? That's the problem we're facing. So is it something that we can use the military for? Our military forces are down a little bit, and I don't know, we could help some, but we remember national defense is vitally important. You don't want to endanger that. So we'll look at that though.
Yeah, and it's just a question, just throwing out there.
Sure, everything.
We're talking about dock workers and we're talking about driving trucks. These are good paying jobs.
You're doggone right.
They're not bad jobs, so why are we having trouble filling these spots?
That's what we're trying to figure out. I mean, that's what I said, is it that people have learned to enjoy their time off more than their time working for the amount of dollars that are being paid. But if you start paying at the higher level, then it's going to add to the inflation that's already coming. Remember that inflation is going to be here because of the money we pumped in, because you have too many dollars chasing too few of items. By not being able to get the items in, inflation is going to increase as well, which then means that those jobs are going to pay more. But the question is the money that you're paid going to, even though it's more money, does it have the ability to buy as much as it did before? That's constant being weighed out. Now, I mean, if somebody would have told me that they'd pay $80,000 for new truck drivers for an incentive bonus to sign up and work for, guarantee you're going to be there for 5 years, $80,000, and then pay what they pay per hour to drive a truck, and somebody would have told me that, I thought, wow, that's amazing. But if your dollar has the buying power of a quarter.
I drove for 13 years.
Yeah.
And they start out way higher than what I made after my 13th year.
Exactly. Yeah. And when I hear what they're making, it's amazing. But like I said, what's the buying power of the dollar you're making?
Right. Absolutely. I know inflation is right now looming on everyone's mind. All the way from fast food workers all the way up.
Sure.
We're having to pay more just to even be able to open our store to get enough employees to run better minimum scales and crews.
Right.
We've also got to raise the prices.
Right.
But
and a lot of the things that were done by human before will probably be because companies are going to have no choice. Technology is going to start. I was right there. Robot. Yep. I've got I was at a plant yesterday that builds the wheel assemblies, and they build their entire train cars. And they have got a new contract. They're going to do Metro in Chicago and everything like that. They are no longer have welders and grinders. They have a machine that calculates based on the computer and goes in and does the weld and does all of this while a guy watches, one person watches. And I said, wow, I was always impressed by the fact that I was very good at running a very good bead, and I guess that's just going to be a lost art. And they say, yeah, pretty well.
Wow. It's
it's changing times.